to thank everyone who has come to this webinar this evening. I'm super excited to talk to you all about conscious leadership and team management. And all I can say is that, well, if you're on this call, then maybe you are a glutton for punishment. And the reason why I say that is because, as Kareem talked about, leadership development is all about being self-aware. And self-awareness is a continuous process. It is lifelong and, dare I say, extremely painful at times. And those growing pains come from our failures, as leaders. It comes from us not doing the best that we could have done in terms of management. But the thing about it is, what's so exciting about this particular certificate is that we are going to avoid, or potentially avoid, some of the obstacles or the roadblocks that you may have already experienced, or if you're going to be new into a managerial or leadership capacity, we're going to try and avert some of those things so that it isn't as painful for you. So the CLTM certificate, it is going to really be a multi-pronged approach to creative leadership and how we go about the business of handling complex problems and navigating change. And when we utilize the term creative leadership, this means that when we're going through this program, we really don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into any particular leadership development theory, okay? I am a big proponent of being able to take a little bit of everything and make it your own, because one of the downsides of just really holding on to one particular mode of leadership development is that you are now not as open to other perspectives, which again does not allow for you to be self-aware, which again is at the foundation of what it means to be upon your leadership journey. So when we're looking at kind of like the overarching program outcomes, you are really going to understand and really get some tools about how to improve your own particular leadership style. We all have one. And our leadership style, in part, is based on our personality. It's based off of our personal experiences, what has happened for us professionally. All of these things shape our style. It all shapes the way we show up in the workplace, whether it be to colleagues, our subordinates, and even to our superiors. And so what we want to do is we want to come away from this certificate program with some very specific practices and tools that are going to enhance what's already there. So we don't want to come into this thinking, oh, I'm not already good enough, or, oh, this is what I don't have. No, we want to talk about what you do have and then take that to the next level. To that end, we really want to also focus in on emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, it's been out here for forever. A lot of people, already know about emotional intelligence, what it entails, but we like to utilize emotional intelligence and take it a little bit step further and really focusing in on the biological bases of where emotional intelligence comes from. And I don't want you to get scared and think like this is like super scientific, because it's not. But I think one of the things that I have learned over the years is not to just specifically focus on what is happening, but looking at why it's happening. So for instance, when you hear a term like emotional intelligence, anyone can say, well, oh, these are the particular categories of that, particular theory, and this is why it is, okay? But when you look a little bit further, this also suggests that it's not just as surface as being able to say, like, these are the quadrants of emotional intelligence. It really is about digging deeper to understand exactly where emotional intelligence comes from. And when you have that sort of information within your toolbox, then you are more quickly able to assess why something has happened and not looking at just the what, which is actually more of an emotional response. We also are going to be looking at how to increase our psychological capital. So psychological capital is something that's a very near and dear to me, as it was part of like my doctoral studies. And so psychological capital is made up of 4 different constructs. It's hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And these are all things that in order to be a good leader or manager, You need all of them packaged together, not just, oh, I'm hopeful, but then I'm not resilient. Oh, I believe I can do something, but then at the same time, I'm not very optimistic. You really want to focus in on how to increase our psychological capital, which in turn also improves upon our emotional intelligence. So all of these things together really go back to being those specific practices and tools that are going to build upon your particular leadership style. We also want to look at managing people's threat perception. When we talk about threat perceptions, this goes a little bit back to what I was stating before about why do people do what they do. And I'm sure you guys have heard before, especially when it comes to siblings. You can have 2 or 3 people that are brought up in the same home, but they have a completely different outlook on what exactly happened within that home. So when we come into a particular work environment, there are things that trigger us. There are things that trigger our colleagues, our superiors, our subordinates, and we have to really be cognizant of that, because in doing so, this allows for us, again, to build upon our leadership style. It makes us not only aware of that other person, but then how we treat that person in turn, and whether or not we are actually at the source of being why they feel threatened in the first place, which is a lot of times what happens between leaders and their followers. We're also going to be talking about how do we shape the culture and norms of groups. It's very important to note, as I'm sure you all have experienced, that leadership, everything falls from the top, right? And when our leader isn't necessarily doing what they're supposed to do, then it can create negative culture and norms within our organizations. And if it isn't necessarily in our organizations, it can also be within our teams. And so it's important, again, for us to understand that we are what shapes our team, our organizations. We are the individuals that we're going to provide that experience for others. And when we aren't doing it in the proper way, we're really actually taking away from our own ability to be better leaders, because now we're not receiving that type of feedback, or we're not receiving trust and all the things that actually feed us as professionals. We'll also talk a little bit about how do we develop incentives for boosting motivation, engagement, performance, and how to, most importantly for me, promoting an environment of consistent learning and mastery. So essentially, you guys, if you've ever come to the point where you feel like you've arrived, you'll never be there, okay? We are never going to fully arrive. If we have, it means that we have stopped learning. And this program, again, is all going to be about not just leadership, but how after we are at that place of leadership, that it is our responsibility to continue to learn and continue to push ourselves, which inadvertently serves as a model to others to push themselves as well. Next slide, please. So our curriculum overview, we have 2 courses. The first course is going to be leading from within. So this is really going to be our opportunity to explore all of the core skills and techniques that are going to be crucial to effective leadership and management. So this, I believe, is one of the most impactful courses. I like to think that they all are, right? But the reason why I say that is because you focus on yourself. Okay, so it's easy sometimes from a leadership perspective to say, well, this is what other people aren't doing. This particular course is really talking about how do we lead from within? What are our own natural strengths? What type of style do we have? How do we foster resilience and emotional intelligence within ourselves and across our organization? And sometimes within that, we realize that we've been missing the mark, but that's okay. That's the reason why you guys are here learning about what this program is about, because it's your first step in the direction of changing any incorrect terms that you might have made previously, or getting you on the path towards success. And it's very important to know that this first course is all going to be around looking at the self and how we show up in our workspace. For course 2, we're going to talk about achieving leadership success through team optimization. So when we say the first part of this is achieving leadership success. So this suggests that we do not achieve leadership without an optimal team. So a lot of times, I'm sure you guys have heard, people will like describe themselves as a boss, okay? But being a boss doesn't necessarily mean that people are willingly following you. And what's important about being a leader is knowing that you have the ability to inspire others to follow or to perform or to meet their organizational and individual goals. If you are not doing that, then you have not achieved leadership success. So this second course is really going to be around how do we engage and motivate others to the point where we're going to enhance their performance. And you'll also get some information on how to effectively coach yourselves as well as resolve conflict. And I say coaching because you have to think about it. Being in a leadership role, again, is that responsibility. And it's not just about saying, this is the task that you have for today. These are all the deliverables that need to get done. It's also about checking in with an individual to see how their day is going. It's also about checking in to say, this person seems to be bored, in this particular role. How can I utilize their skills in a different way? It is about paying attention. Okay? So leading from within, when we're looking at the overarching learning objectives here, we want to look at ourselves within complex systems of our organization, understanding the leadership and motivation techniques. These are going to be well supported by rigorous research. So we're definitely going to touch into what I can consider to be like pop literature, or those books that are out there that almost have like a self-help feel, because I appreciate those books as well. But I also want you to know that what we'll be talking about is going to be well supported by rigorous research, just to make sure that we have that foundation there. In addition, again, we're going to be learning leadership style, providing with you with those insights about problem solving, how to make a decision, resolving conflict, understanding, you guys, that leadership and management are actually two totally different things. And a lot of times they get lumped together, but they really are different. And we'll also be looking at how leadership really needs to also encompass the ability to manage if you're going to be an effective leader. And then lastly, we're going to be combining emotional intelligence and psychological capital, just so we can get a clear understanding about how to connect with others as a leader. With our learning outcomes, you really want to be able to walk away from this first course with developing a plan about how you're going to apply these leadership skills techniques. And we want to do that both personally and professionally. The reason why we split it across those two domains is because a lot of times what happens to us personally impacts how we show up professionally, and vice versa. So we really want to have that opportunity to look at, how do I lead, as a spouse? How do I lead as a daughter? How do I lead, as a child? So, these are things that are important for us to tap into. And a lot of times we don't, because we don't think that they impact our professional life, but in fact they do. Also, you want to be able to walk away with a clear understanding of some basic communication principles as they relate to leadership and management. Communication is huge, huge, huge for leaders. One of the major reasons why there's conflict within organizations revolves around trust, particularly when there are transitions within organizations, and things are in the flux or in the midst of change, and leadership is not appropriately, making sure that everyone is on the same page with communication. It's important for us to understand that this is a necessity for leadership and management. We really want to walk away with some basic communication principles as well. You'll be able to describe techniques that are going to be influential to others in your organization. So more specifically, rational, social, and emotional approaches to influence. So again, really honing in on specific techniques for influential practices. And then lastly, describing techniques about how to respond and adapt to change. So we're going to really hone in on what's called the ADKAR model of awareness, desire, knowledge, ability. Our next course, which is Achieving Leadership Successfully Team Optimization. With this course, you are really going to focus in on how to engage, motivate others to maximize their team performance. Now, there are so many different types of teams. I'm not sure where everyone is coming from, but as I'm sure you know, you have the teams that meet face-to-face on a regular basis. You have teams that are virtual. You have teams that everyone is an individual contributor to a particular project, and that's what makes the project successful. And then you have others that are extremely collaborative, and everyone is a part of that decision-making process. For each of those scenarios, we need to understand what engages and motivates others to really participate. Because at the end of the day, being a part of a team is a choice. Cooperation and collaboration is a choice. And sometimes we don't do it, and a lot of times our teammates may not do it as well. So we want to avoid those instances where people are demotivated or disengaged. We'll also be coming back into really looking again at our research base. So Bruce Tuckman's team development model of forming, storming, learning, and performing. This is going to be a huge overarching umbrella, if you will, for this particular course because of its focus on each stage of the team process, looking at teamwork versus what's task work. Really also taking into consideration that every single team is going to go through these particular stages, but where we don't want to get stuck at, I don't want to say too much, but we don't want to get stuck in some of these particular stages, because if we do, then we never get to the place of being a high performance. Also, we want to analyze practices that are going to build emotionally intelligent teams, because again, looking at where we're coming from as leaders. As leaders, we are the model for what we expect of other people. So if we are emotionally intelligent, we are demonstrating to others how to, really get a hold of their emotions, how they react to certain situations, how they can make better choices to really be constructive in the manner by which they operate with people within their team. And then we'll also be examining some methods of how do we support teams through challenging situations. Because there is also a such thing as, a team being extremely high performing and successful, but then a change comes about that can potentially dismantle them. So we're also going to take a look at what does it mean to already be high performing, and a conflict comes in, a challenge is presented, and you may lose that high effectiveness. Our learning outcomes. So once you walk away from this, you want to be able to improve your leadership skills across cross-functional teams by really creating some strategies that are going to build inclusivity. You want teams that are going to be creative, innovative. You really want to be able to model how to utilize, the conflict resolution technique in order to manage groups. I think another piece that's going to be extremely exciting about this particular course is that we're really going to focus in on managers being coaches, and really understanding how to empower others. So again, not just walking away with the skill of being a leader per se, but also what does it mean to coach someone else? What does it mean to empower? And so we'll talk about various verbal and nonverbal coaching skills, how to give and receive feedback, particularly around performance evaluation, and then also how to help people to set goals. We have to understand that we're dealing with other human beings and that people have goals for their lives. And whether or not we realize it or not, sometimes whether or not someone takes another step in their life has everything to do with how they are in relation to their leader.
All right. So I'm unmuting everyone. We would love to hear your questions. So who would want to start? We actually have a question from Sarah Hedden. So Samantha, do you believe that it is possible to turn a team around through successful leadership, or is there a point where too much damage has been done and the team breeds toxicity?
Absolutely. I like to be realistic with situations. I think that when trust is severely broken, it is extremely difficult to get people back to where they need to be. In fact, a leader really must get to the place where it might just be more advantageous to dismantle and then rebuild. But in addition to that, the leader has to be extremely, again, emotionally intelligent and knowledgeable about their team to then say, we don't just throw another group of people together and call them a team. This is more about how am I paying attention to the strengths and talents of these particular individuals? What do I know about this particular person's disposition? What do I know about these individuals before I put them together and try to, quote unquote, force collaboration and cooperation? So sometimes it's better to dismantle and rebuild.
Who has another question? Go ahead. Feel free to also type in the chat room. We have some background noise, so what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to mute everyone, and please share your questions to Samantha or myself through the chat room. Happy to answer anything you have about the content, about the different courses, or anything about the structure of that program for that matter. While you may be thinking about your next question, let me actually give you some information about the program. So it is a fully online program, 2-course program. Each course is 6 weeks in length. Every week you will have what we call a synchronous session with your instructor, Samantha Coleman. So it is 1 hour of live time with your instructor and your classmates through Zoom, which is the digital conferencing platform that we're using tonight for this presentation, which will allow for direct questions, conversations, but also activities using the tools that you may have learned through the self-paced learning system. We're using Canvas as our learning management system. And the 2 courses, the first course will start on the 4th of March, and the second one will start at the beginning of June, the 5th of June. We have another question from Pamela. Would you rather exert lots of efforts trying to retain employees or consider moving on, leading to a new set of employees? Let me unmute you.
Sure.
Yep.
So I think that's an excellent question. I think where we need to go back to is that self-awareness piece and asking yourself, have you done everything that you needed to do in order to really take your employees to the next level? And a lot of times, in all honesty, we just haven't. We come into particular situations, as I stated before, with our own baggage, or we're feeling threatened, by something, and we don't always treat employees a particular way, especially when I think about retraining. It makes me think about how many employees come into their positions never being trained at all. And then they're thrown in, they're not performing up to snuff. And then all of a sudden it's like that employee has an issue. And leadership doesn't take a step back to say, well, hey, did we actually provide that individual with the proper training when they came? Did we actually put them through a productive and educational onboarding process? And a lot of times organizations aren't doing that. And leadership has to take responsibility for that. And it's important, again, when we're looking at the individuals on our team, we have to then say, have I done everything that I needed to do for them? Do I even know this person? Because sometimes we don't know the person, we know their behaviors, or we know their responses to us, but we don't actually know them or what, makes them tick. And when you don't know those things, then it's easy to get caught in the weeds about this person essentially like being a lost cause. So I always like to look at it from the vantage point of, what did I do and what didn't I do? And if I can honestly say that I did all that I can for an employee, even with the training process, well, then sometimes you have to move on. Like I've even experienced managers who don't want to fire people. Like they're afraid to, terminate. And they're driving themselves crazy. But it gets to a point that once you've done what you, had to do, honestly, then retraining is not an option. It might just be best to allow for that person to split ways with you.
All right, Pamela, really appreciates your feedback. Any other questions that you want to share with Samantha? So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to turn to Tyron Harris for the information on the registration process. If in the meantime, we have more questions. So Sarah, I have noticed a type of leadership that relies on policy only.
Can you say a little bit more about that, Sarah? What are your thoughts on being a policy-heavy leader?
What are your thoughts on being a policy-heavy leader?
Yeah, so I would even go so far as to say that I don't think there's a such thing as a policy-heavy leader. I would say that there's a such thing as an individual who is very conscientious and very concerned about details and making sure that all ducks are in a row, all I's are dotted, and all T's are crossed. And so it is typically that type of disposition that goes into workspaces that are around policy. What can be, I believe, unnerving for the individual that is the subordinate of the policy-heavy leader is that there is a perception that that individual is inflexible, or that that individual relies so heavily on the written word, but they never take the time to actually explain why that policy is there. Because honestly, the policies are there for a reason. And most times it is for a protective, measure, whether it be for the individuals within the organization or the organization as a whole. So they're there for a reason. But when it comes across in a way that is so matter of fact, then depending on who the followers are in that situation, it just rubs them the wrong way and it reduces trust. So I would go so far as to say that this isn't a policy-heavy leader. It is someone who is, their disposition is all about the details, all about being very cautious and conscientious, and they have difficulty in effectively communicating with other behavioral styles about why that policy is important. So sometimes it's just a clash of styles.
We have another question from Mike. There is a school of thought that when a toxic employee is placed within a group, that person can bring down production. The same school of thought believes that it is advantageous to pair the productive people together to compensate for this lack of production. Do you share this ideology?
That's a good question, Mike. So I'm going to start from the back, actually. So pairing productive people together depends on what productive is. Everyone has kind of like a different definition of what productive is. But what I found with leadership is that they will begin to place certain people together or place additional workload onto those individuals who they deem to be the most productive. Those individuals tend to get worn out from so many like requests of them, and then they're no longer as productive as they were, previously. When we talk about an individual being a toxic employee, again, what does toxicity mean? What is that person doing? What are the behaviors? Is the person coming into the situation where, it's just like a personality issue? Or is it, one where an individual just does not fit within the organization? A lot of times we don't think about this, right? We, apply for a job, we have the skills, we have the abilities for that particular position, and we apply, and it's like, oh, this should be great. But then you don't necessarily fit within the organization's culture. It doesn't mean that you don't have what you need to have in order to do that job. It does mean that there is not person organization fit. So I'm very cautious about calling people toxic, because I also believe that toxic leadership breeds toxic employees. I think that toxic leadership is also continuously pairing people that are deemed to be productive together. I think it's more of an opportunity sometimes to actually deal more with the negative person, so that you can really almost make them an ally of sorts, to really understand a different perspective of what's going on. Because one thing is for certain, when you have a different perspective in a group of very like-minded individuals, it's easy also to label that person as being toxic because they don't share the same perspective. And a lot of times leaders are not taking the time to say, okay, in the midst of, even if I don't agree with you, in the midst of it, let me just listen, for a second to what that person has to say. And they might have dropped a gem if you aren't paying attention to it.
Thank you, Samantha. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to now turn to Tyron Harris. And if you have any questions while Tyron is presenting, please feel free to share them in the chat room, and I'll make sure to read them to Samantha.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name again is Tyron Harris. I am a assistant director of student recruitment here at the University of Chicago Graham School. And today, very briefly, I just wanted to discuss basically the next steps if you decide that this is a good fit for you here. I know that we actually have some alums on the chat, so I do want to share with you the fact that we have an awesome alumni scholarship program. And what that means, if you have completed a Graham School certificate, then you can actually start a second certificate and receive a 20% scholarship on any single certificate course that does not require a prerequisite, of course. Keep in mind that any additional full certificate program that there are courses that are required to be completed in order to receive that certificate. If you feel that you are in this category as an alum and you want to take advantage of that scholarship program, please contact Lisa Malvin or Nicole Reyes, and they can verify your eligibility and of course, help you with the next steps. Now, for anyone who's interested in going through the application process, basically it's really straightforward. The application, it just requires that you have a bachelor's degree, of course. we ask that you upload an unofficial copy of your college transcripts. You must submit a statement of purpose, just 250 words, and you're just describing your educational and professional background. You're talking about what you want to gain or what you hope to uh, receive from this certificate, and then how you plan to put it in action. You know, how you plan to utilize the skills that you've learned in the certificate in your professional career. Now, in addition to your statement of purpose, we ask that you also upload and provide a current professional resume or CV. And there is, of course, a $40 application fee. Now, I know that tonight you have received a lot of information, so we don't expect you to remember it all. But if you have specific questions or you want to talk to someone about a certain certificate, especially the conscious leadership certificate and team management, please contact the admissions department. And so starting with our medical specialty certificates, you can contact Ms. Andrea Dothart, and she also handles our digital marketing and editing certificates. And then if you're interested in our data analytics for business professionals, you can contact Mr. Charles Barkley. And of course, to start this fantastic conscious leadership and team management certificate, please contact myself, Tyron Harris. Our information will be shared with everyone. And then also on the next slide, you can see my contact information, email address, phone number. So don't hesitate to email in or call us because again, we would love to help you with the next steps and help you make a smooth transition into any certificate program that you feel is a good fit. So thank you all so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to helping you with the next steps.
Well, thank you everyone for attending this presentation and staying with us the entire time. You will also receive my contact information. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the content or about the structure or the administration of the program. And should you be interested in sharing some questions with Samantha, please send them to me as well, and I will make sure to share them with Samantha Coleman. If you have any other questions, now it's time to ask them. I do not see anything, so I wish you a good evening, and I hope to be talking with you in the near future about this program. Take care, everyone. Good night.